think I would start by downloading Macroquest. There's a GitHub. There's a lot of other different builds you can get, but this is like the main one. On the GitHub you'll be able to find, should be able to find the releases right here, and then you've got a release that'll work, a compiled release that's going to work on the test, the live, or the emu. And I'm assuming you're probably just going to grab the emu. If you don't really know what you're doing, you might get on this Git page and think you want to try to build Macroquest, but you don't really have to do that. You don't have to compile, you just use the releases, which are pre-compiled. So once you get Macroquest downloaded, it's not really going to be configured. It's just going to have some stuff to get started. You got this config folder, and there's nothing in there. But as soon as you go and you run Macroquest, it's gonna build your Macroquest INI, and it looks like it also made your MPQ2 auto login. And what that means is in your Macroquest INI, that's where there's a lot of different configurations, but one of the main ones is your plugins. It's where you can enable or disable your plugins. And MPQ2 auto login.ini, if you're going to do, there's a few different ways you can do auto login, but one of the easier ways is to use this MPQ2 auto login plugin. And in this INI you set it up. If you set it up like this, then this is where you save your account name and your password and your server and your character name. So to load up all my boxes, I basically have a shortcut for each character, and then when you edit the shortcut, you can see that it's got normally you wouldn't put this kind of thing in your shortcut, but with Macroquest you can right here this is your shortcut. It's got the patch me, and then you've got this /login : and then you can put your account name. And so whenever you click the shortcut, it's going to open up EQ and it's going to automatically put in the account name. But to go along with this, you use just a batch file, which is going to load. It's basically just going to, start the shortcut and then do just a 10-second pause, and then so it doesn't load all the characters all at once. So there's a delay between each of them, so there's no problem when they try to start up. Because if you try to start up like 16 boxes all at the same time, it's not going to work right. So once you've edited the MQ2 auto login INI, and you've got your batch file, and you've got your shortcuts to each of your characters, all you've got to do is you just load Macroquest, and then you run your bash file, and then that's gonna kick off and load up all your boxes and have them auto log in and have them log into your server, and then that's the first hurdle you got to get over to start using Macroquest pretty much. So once you get loaded up, there's some other things that you need. Like there's a MQ2 nav plugin, and it requires nav meshes for each of the zones. So if you go over to mqmesh.com, you can download all the meshes. Once you get the meshes, you can drop them into your MQ2 folder, in your resources, MQ2 nav, and then all your meshes can go in here. You just download the meshes, drop them in there, and then they'll work. But if you try to use these meshes, there's a problem. Your client, if it's not patched, it can't use more memory than like 4 gigs. So if you go and you download this 4 gigabyte patch, you just download the patch and you patch your eqgame.exe in your client folder, and then that will allow the meshes to load correctly. If you're running out of memory when you're trying to load your meshes, it's because you haven't done the 4 gigabyte patch, and that's why you can't, your MQ2 nav isn't working correctly. But if you download the patch, you patch your eqgame.exe, you shouldn't have any problem loading the meshes or running out of memory like that. So by default, all of the plugins that you're going to want are not probably going to be enabled in your MQ2 plugins folder. You've got a bunch of DLLs, and you can kind of look through and see all of some of the available plugins that you could enable. To enable them, all you have to do is go into your Macroquest INI, and these are just the ones that I add to the default list. So if you add these, the DanNet, the nav, the cast, the EQBC, the HUD, the melee, netbots, and moveutils, those are probably maybe some of the ones that you want to enable. But if you throw those in there, that is probably what you're going to want. Just throw them in there, save it, load it up. If you don't want those enabled, you can disable them later. It's whatever you want to do. So I think at this point I would probably start going into my config folder, and in there are a bunch of, there's usually an INI or config file for each of the plugins. If you go in there and you look up each of your plugins that you want to use, you can look up the settings and how to configure it, and that's usually what I would do here. But at this point, we basically got the things we need enabled to get started and to start making things work and have Macroquest do things for us that it can do. Okay, so Macroquest has a plugin called MQ2 Move Utilities, and it's got a function called stick. So if you take your character, and with the plugin you can select a character and you can type /stick, and then your character will basically run over and stick to that. It's got parameters like a distance. You can do like stick 0 and your character should stick very closely at a distance of like 0, or you can do like stick 5, which is usually about how far you want to be away when you're meleeing. But the basic idea is you can select an NPC, or you can select one of your own characters. You can hit stick and your character will follow. It'll follow your character. So Macroquest has got another plugin. It's called DanNet, which is it's not necessarily new, but it is the newer replacement for NetBots, which was it's just a way for the boxes, each character to share information with other characters and to send commands to other characters. So DanNet has like these commands that let you send a command to all your boxes, or send a command to just one of your boxes, or send a command to everybody but yourself, or everybody and yourself. And it's got these weird little commands to let you do that. So to send the stick command, you usually do like a /DGZE, which means send the command to everybody but myself in the same zone as I am in. So it's basically DGZE /stick 5 is the distance, UW means underwater, and ID means ID, me.id means stick to my ID. You do that, and then you have all your characters will stick to you. You can run around, and that's basically how you set that button up. On the end of my stick command, I usually have also a attack off, a pet back off, and there's another command right here. It's notify. If you read it, it's notify loot window, done button, left mouse up. That just, if you're looting something, it'll stop you from looting, and it'll have you stick to the character. If you don't have that little line in there, the notify, it won't. Your loot window will just stay up and the stick command won't do anything. So with that, you've got a stick command, but you also need a stick off command, which if you have a nav going, or you have a stick going, or a move to, which are MQ2 nav and MQ2 nav utility stuff. If you want to stop that, it's good to have a button that'll stop all that stuff. It's basically, I use stick off, I'm a move to off, and nav stop, and these few different commands in your stick off button are gonna, if you don't have that button, it's gonna be really complicated. So the stick and the stick is a part of the move utilities, and it works pretty good, but it's kind of rudimentary. You can only really like target you can face, and then you can run straight towards, whatever you're targeting. But the MQ2 nav lets you really like cut a path through zones and run around obstacles and stuff like that, because the nav mesh has information about where the characters can run. And if you want to run all the way across the zone to another NPC, MPQ2 nav is going to let you do that without running into stuff. So where the stick is just going to let you go somewhere, you can use the nav to, if you know the name of your character, then you can do like nav target, and that'll let you run hands-free to where you want to go, you don't have to control your character all the time. And the same way you can use stick to have all your characters stick to you, you can use nav to have all your characters run to you even if there's obstacles in your way. So I've got just a few nav buttons that I use. I have one that is for the character I'm controlling. If I push the button, it's going to nav target, and it's going to go, and it's going to use the nav system to run to whatever I'm targeting. I've got another button that is nav to me, which is going to, if I click that one, it's going to have all the characters nav to me without using the stick. And then I have another button which is, I just call it nav go to, which is I use for looting. So I can target a corpse, or I can target an NPC, and then I can hit the nav go to button, and every character but myself will run there. And usually I use that with a loot button, so I can just target a corpse, send all my characters over there, and then hit the loot button, and then all my characters will loot whatever's on the ground around them. So the first one is nav to me, which is going to have, it looks like this, it's just DGZE nav ID to me with a pet back off. Which will make sense once you start grinding. And then the nav go to is really just tell everybody to target a specific NPC and then nav to that target. And then one more, which is just basically just a nav target. So there's the nav to me, there's the nav to target my character, and then I have another button that's a nav all my other characters to a target. So it's just those three nav buttons that basically do everything. And so I might as well show you the loot button. That's basically just tell everybody, including myself, key press, cycle corpse targets, and then it does the loot. There's the click for the loot on the corpse, and then there's a timer that will run, and so it'll give the character time to loot, and then after it loots, it'll automatically close the loot window button. And that's all there is to the loot button. And I think that's pretty much most of the basics. All you really need. And then on top of that, you're going to use, I think all these people on this server use like E3. I never used it because I learned some other way.